morning and welcome to the members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. I'm also pleased to welcome members of the public who are joining us via live stream. It's a pleasure to open this first meeting of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council for 2022, which marks 10 years since the first EJCC meeting was convened. My name is Allison Barkoff, and I am the Administration for Community Living's Acting Administrator and Assistant Secretary for Aging. I serve as the Delegated Chair of the EJCC, standing in for the U.S. Before I begin discussing today's meeting format, I want to highlight why the EJCC meeting is always held in June. This month contains a special day that is observed around the globe. On June 15th, we commemorated World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. ACL's grantee, the National Center on Elder Abuse, worked with us to plan our annual campaign for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. This year, we literally painted the nation purple, lifting up the almost 200 events from across the U.S. For example, Wisconsin hosted 21 events, Texas hosted 17 events, and North Carolina hosted 17 events. Among the many creative events that were held, I want to highlight a few. The Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation in Florida hosted a community information expo and stroll down memory lane. In Georgia, the Cobb County government created something called a Yarn Storm Project, where they accepted donations of knitted or crocheted squares and then installed the yarn-covered displays to honor older adults and bring attention to the issue of elder abuse. The Kickapoo tribe of Oklahoma held a bingo, breakfast, and information session on preventing elder abuse. The Sheboygan County Health and Human Services in Wisconsin ran a hygiene product drive, and they placed pinwheels around the community showing the number of APS referrals. The WWBL radio station in Indiana had a discussion with the Illinois Department of Aging director about financial exploitation and other common forms of abuse. And the Texas Department of Family Protective Services held its third annual Elder Abuse Awareness Day parade. This year was truly a nationwide and worldwide event, and we have shared with the public information about events in 12 other countries, including Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Nigeria, Trinidad, Tobago, India, Qatar, Singapore, Kenya, South Africa, and South Korea. This is evidence of progress. Communities working together through webinars and trainings, to walks, resource fairs, proclamations, wearing purple pins in solidarity, and via social media campaigning to end elder abuse by spreading the word about how to identify risks and by taking part in prevention activities, showcasing interventions, and disseminating resources. All of these actions left us with a hopeful feeling last week. This meeting and this month's commemoration reminds us all of our obligation to secure a just society in which older Americans live free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We have a collective responsibility to ensure elder justice, to build greater awareness of the ways to prevent elder maltreatment, and to identify and implement solutions to end abuse, neglect, and exploitation when it occurs, and to recover from it when it does happen. By doing these things, we are building a better society for all of us, including older members of our communities. And that is why we are here today, to share some of the most pertinent updates from the field of elder justice. Today, we'll be hearing from experts in government, academia, the nonprofit sector, and from international partners. They'll speak about two important subjects: nursing home reform, enforcement, and residents' rights, and then what we know about effective messaging strategies to prevent scams and frauds that target older adults. Let me tell our members of the public a little bit about the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. The EJCC is composed of members spanning 17 federal departments, agencies, and other entities with responsibilities for addressing elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The EJCC's purpose is to assure coordination across the federal government in elder justice, and specifically to make recommendations to the Health and Human Services Secretary on the coordination of activities related to elder abuse, neglect, exploitation, and other crimes against older adults across the federal government. The Council also provides Congress with a biennial report of activities, accomplishments, and recommendations for further action. Housing and urban development, justice, labor, treasury, and veterans affairs. And from AmeriCorps, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the FCC and FTC, the SEC, Social Security, the U.S. Postal Inspection Services, and EJCC's most recent addition, the Legal Services Corporation. We are honored to welcome the Legal Services Corporation today as our newest member. I want to personally welcome Ronald Flagg, LSC's president, who was appointed president of the LSC effective February 20th of 2020. LSC has played an instrumental role in promoting elder justice and elder rights by administering grants that provide vital civil legal aid in every state. With LSC as a member, I am confident that EJCC will even more meaningfully address the justice gap experienced by low-income older Americans. I also want to take a moment to thank the many members of our audience, especially those who provide legal assistance and often provide life-saving legal support to America's older adults. At ACL, we know firsthand of the great work being done by legal assistance organizations funded through the Older Americans Act and the Legal Services Corporation. And I am sure that each member of this council can point to their experiences with the legal aid assistant organizations and communities across our nation. To each of you, thank you so much for your dedication and support. Many of you may notice that the format of today's meeting differs from the usual structure and the structure of our last meeting. We will not today be asking our council members to provide updates during our time together. Instead, we're going to be hearing from renowned experts who are invited to share presentations on elder justice priority issues. Member updates will be posted to our EJCC website soon after today's meeting. So let me turn to the heart of our presentation. We are gathered today to hear about key issues and priority areas of focus in the administration and for all of us. And we are so pleased to be sharing this space today with some of the nation's leading elder justice experts who will be addressing nursing home reform enforcement and residents' rights, and then effective strategies for messaging to combat elder fraud and scams. All members of the public are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions, please send emails directly to ejpubliccomments, all one word, ejpubliccomments at acl.hhs.gov. If you have any audio or visual problems today, we recommend exiting and re-entering the live stream. Today, we'll be hearing 10 minutes of presentation from each of 6 experts who are grouped into these 2 panels. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions after each of the 30-minute panels. Council members, you will be queued for the 15-minute question and answer segment after each panel, and your microphones will be unmuted at the start of the QA segment. Please keep your questions brief, and we suggest you write them down as you think of them so we can efficiently get to every question. Now I would like to introduce our first panel, Nursing Home Reform, Enforcement, and Residents' Rights. It's critically important to ensure that older adults, no matter where they live, are safe, receive quality care, and have their rights protected. With more than a third of deaths from COVID in nursing homes, a spotlight was shown on the many problems that exist in nursing homes. And that's the impetus for the Nursing Home Reform Initiative that we'll be hearing about from the panel today. At the same time, it's critical that we continue our work to help people in nursing homes who can and want to transition to homes in the community. We'll be hearing presentations by first, Will Harris, Senior Advisor from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Next, we will be hearing from Susan Lynch, Senior Trial Counsel for Elder Justice in the Civil Fraud Section at the United States Department of Justice. And then we'll be hearing. So let me start by welcoming Will Harris to launch us into our first panel. He will provide remarks concerning CMS's work on the Nursing Home Initiative. And I'll just say Will has been and continues to be a great ally, not only to ACL, but really to our entire community. Thank you so much, Will, and I'll kick it to you.
Thank you very much, Allison, and thank you for that really kind introduction. I do not deserve that at all, but I'm very happy to help in any ways that I ever can. Appreciate you saying that. Very glad to be with you all today. My name is Will Harris. I'm a senior advisor in the administrator's office here at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. If you're not familiar with us, we're an agency of about 6,000 full-time employees that handles what we affectionately call the 3 M's: Medicare, Medicaid, and marketplace health insurance. Among all of those, we end up touching about 150 Americans' lives in their health insurance coverage. And more importantly, for what I'll be talking to you today, is that we set the safety and quality of care standards for our 17 different regulated provider types, one of which is skilled nursing facilities or nursing facilities. So that's the context in which I am coming to you today. If you're interested in this topic, I may have already talked to you and had this conversation with you already. And if I haven't, I'm sure that I would like to, because much of our approach has been in hearing from the community, hearing from experts, and I've
Listen did go in and out a couple of times. There was a little bit of a lag, but I think it's okay now.
Can you hear me okay, Elizabeth? Okay. Sorry. Okay.
I'm so sorry, Will. Yes, you're fine.
Okay. A plus. So thank you if I've talked to you already, and if not, please, we'll be very happy to hear from you and answer questions in our Q&A session. But I'll start off talking about what we're working on at CMS. As the president made clear ahead of and in his first State of the Union address, we know that the time is now to address the crisis in America's nursing homes. At CMS, we feel like we have really a moral responsibility to improve conditions for nursing home residents and their staff, and we're acting on that. Nursing homes, like my colleague Allison said before, were disproportionately affected by the COVID pandemic. We know that too many residents and staff lost their lives to COVID across the country. And as I'm sure you all know too well, throughout the pandemic, residents experienced severe isolation and disruptions in care as the pandemic exposed and exacerbated longstanding problems in the nation's nursing homes. I think the main point that I would bring out here is that obviously not every problem facing the nation's nursing homes today were caused by the pandemic. I think that everyone would agree that many were longstanding problems that were just highlighted and exacerbated by the experience that everyone had in the last couple of years. So that's why we've unveiled an ambitious set of reforms to improve staffing, strengthen accountability, and increase transparency in nursing homes. The foundation of all of these changes is the establishment of a minimum nursing home staffing requirement, which will be informed by a rigorous new study. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. We're also going to enhance facility oversight and accountability, which is going to include an overhaul of our special focus facility program, updates to how we levy financial penalties outside of the survey process, and also committing to work with Congress to make sure we can adequately fund our survey and certification efforts. We're also going to focus on improving the transparency of facility ownership and finances, including reporting more robust ownership data, making that information easier to find on our web portals, and examining the role of investment owners in the healthcare sector. These reforms were developed through extensive consultation with experts, nursing home workers, and most importantly, conversations that we had with nursing home residents and their loved ones, and the people who are working so hard to advocate for them. So as I'm sure you've seen in the White House fact sheet, and if you haven't already, I encourage you to check that out. There are 21 initiatives spread across 5 strategic goals. Those 5 strategic goals are ensuring that taxpayer dollars support nursing homes that provide safe, adequate, and dignified care, focusing on quality and safety specifically, enhancing accountability and oversight, increasing transparency, creating pathways to good paying jobs with the free and fair choice to join a union, especially for nurses, and ensuring pandemic and emergency preparedness in nursing homes. So I want to note that while the way I've just described these and the way these are structured are in 5 distinct strategic goals, the plan in its entirety is really a holistic approach to improving conditions in nursing homes for both residents and staff. These are really complex issues, which is why the approach we're taking is trying to be comprehensive and thoughtful. So as we look across these 21 initiatives, one of the core ways, the core pieces of work that we've already begun in earnest is about staffing. What we know, all of us, is that adequate staffing levels are tied to safety and quality of care for residents. It's the number one metric that is directly tied, staffing, to quality of care and safety. So that's why you're seeing us focus on that. So in our proposed payment rules that we put out earlier this year, we put out several requests for information that I know many of you have probably already engaged with us on, but that includes a request for information on setting adequate staffing standards and about using a staffing turnover measure for our skilled nursing facility value-based purchasing program or payment program. The way that CMS is approaching this, I always say, is that the RFIs represent a really sincere R. It is very much a sincere request that we want to hear from others about, and we are looking forward to being informed by the I that we receive from you. And more than anything else, I want to highlight this, that our administrator, Chiquita Brooks-LaSure, made it one of our 6 strategic pillars of CMS's strategic plan to hear and incorporate feedback from stakeholders, to make sure we are listening closely from people who have lived experience and integrate that into our policymaking. We value that input, and it's why we do so much work on engagement, and it is why I hope that everyone will see those requests being very serious and sincere from CMS. So I'll talk a little more about the core of our plan about developing a minimum staffing requirement in long-term care facilities. Our goal with that initiative is to empower staff to provide better care by developing an evidence-based and appropriate requirements that will be supported by a rigorous study that are going to permanently strengthen quality of care by ensuring that facilities have enough well-trained staff on duty to provide the services needed to the residents who rely on them. There's no doubt that we need to adopt a very carefully considered approach to implementing this initiative to make sure we find a meaningful balance among the many competing priorities that we have to consider, and also to avoid any unintended consequences. That includes being cognizant of the different needs of each of the facility's residents. And that's part of why we want to make sure that we hear from so many stakeholders during that work. So undeniably, we have a lot of work to get done, and we are actively planning the approach to implementing all of these important initiatives Our focus right now is on identifying the ones where we can take swift action in the short term, while also doing strategic planning on efforts that are going to require a longer term approach. A couple of other areas that we are focusing on in the short term are, as I mentioned earlier, overhauling the Special Focus Facility program, on addressing the inappropriate use of antipsychotics in nursing homes, big priority for us and one we're focusing on very carefully. Improving the use and availability of data about nursing homes on Care Compare, that website, continuing to address COVID-19 in nursing homes, and increasing accountability and transparency on nursing home owners, which I'm sure you already saw that we took action on earlier this year. That was publicly for the first time. We released data on mergers, acquisitions, consolidations, and changes of ownerships for nursing homes and hospitals from 2016 to 2022 for those nursing homes and hospitals that are enrolled in Medicare. We think this can be a powerful new tool for researchers, for state and federal enforcement agencies, and for the public to better understand the impacts of consolidation on healthcare prices and quality of care. And again, I'll say that this was just a first step, but it's an exciting one, and it's one that we're going to keep updated on a quarterly basis going forward. I would also not be remiss not to mention something that my friend Allison spoke to at the top of the call here, and that's that I want to be sure that I say that this effort is running in parallel to other work that we have at CMS that's focused on making sure that people have the choice to get the care that they need in their communities. We think that all people should be able to access long-term care in the appropriate setting of their choice, including through home and community-based services. The nursing home reforms that I'm talking about today are really part of a both and approach. I'm talking about them because that's what we're here today to talk about, but I would hate for you to walk away thinking that we don't also have a lot of work happening on that front that's running in parallel. We are continuing to work on improving the safety and quality of care in the nation's nursing homes because we know the residents who live there rely on that care, as well as on the people who care for them. And they're counting on us at CMS to raise that bar. But in parallel, we're also want to work on efforts to strengthen and invest in home and community-based services to make sure that people with disabilities and seniors and others who need that kind of care can have quality options when making those decisions about where to receive that care, and ensuring that there are not institutional biases that present hurdles for them. So to sum it up, at CMS, we're considering a wide range of methods to get all of this work done. We're looking to use all of our existing authorities and levers to our fullest, because the people who are living and working at the nation's nursing homes are counting on us to do so, and we know that. I'll wrap it up there, and we'll be very happy to take questions here after the panel talks, but I want to say how honored I am to be able to talk to you about this hard work that we're doing, and hope to be able to partner with as many of you in the future as we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that great presentation, and I'm really excited to be able to have folks ask you some questions. And I will just say, Will touched on how robust their stakeholder engagement has been. I think we'll hear about some of that when we hear from Lori Smetanka and others, but it truly has been making sure this is not just hearing from industry, that this is really hearing from people who are the most impacted, people who are residents of nursing homes and their families and other advocates. So thank you, Will. Next up is Susan Lynch, who will be highlighting the Department of Justice's work to address abuse, neglect, and fraud in our nation's nursing homes. So Susan, over to you.
Good morning, Chairwoman Barkoff and members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. I'm Susan Lynch, Senior Counsel for Elder Justice at the United States Department of Justice, where for the past 23 years, I've civilly prosecuted skilled nursing home chains, individual facilities, and owners who provide grossly substandard care to their residents. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the importance of nursing home enforcement and elder justice professional training at this critical time in our nation's history, when many of our nursing home residents are not receiving the quality of care that they desperately need and are not being treated with the basic human dignity we all deserve. As a result, some of our mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers in our nation's nursing homes are getting sicker, are being abused, neglected, and are even slipping into premature death. In my role leading the department's National Nursing Home Initiative, I've heard some tragic stories and honestly have seen some gut-wrenching facts in some of the grossly substandard nursing home cases that I prosecute. But I want to be clear, we are not painting the nursing home industry with a broad brush, and many nursing homes work very hard to provide quality services to those entrusted to their care. But I want to be clear with all of you members of the council and the public. Some nursing homes do not have adequate numbers of trained staff to care for their residents. That is to say, not enough staff to feed the residents, to take that extra time with them, to turn and reposition them as needed. Some nursing homes don't have enough staff to have the appropriate nursing home supplies there for residents. Some nursing homes don't follow required infection control protocols, and some nursing homes don't keep their physical plant clean and safe. And further, some nursing homes overuse antipsychotic medications in an effort to keep their residents compliant. Some of these same nursing homes continue to admit residents to their full census capacity, despite knowing that they lack adequate staff and resources to care for these residents. With some of these poor performing nursing homes, quite frankly, the nation watched in horror as the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic quickly exacerbated poor quality of care conditions with devastating consequences for our nation's residents. And later in this panel, you will hear the voices of the residents themselves when they talk about problems with staffing, infection control, and wait times during the COVID-19 pandemic. During COVID-19, there were also devastating consequences for some nursing staff that persist today as they work tirelessly and heroically through the pandemic, all the while navigating impossible working conditions brought on by staffing shortages and census choices that were made by owners and operators. For over 2 decades, the Department of Justice has brought civil and criminal cases against the nation's largest nursing home chains, small regional chains, single facilities, and against nursing home CEOs and executives who provide grossly substandard care to their residents and commit financial fraud. The National Nursing Home Initiative brought these entities to justice through both the initiative's work and that of the decade-long work of the Elder Justice Initiative in particular. The department's nursing home initiatives coordinate and enhance civil and criminal efforts to pursue nursing homes that provide grossly substandard care to their residents and enhance criminal efforts when it is appropriate in financial fraud situations. The initiative reflects the department's larger strategy and commitment to protecting our nation's seniors through the work of multiple departmental components, and that includes the Elder Justice Initiative, National Nursing Home Initiative, Civil Division, Consumer Protection Branch, Criminal Division, Civil Rights Division, all in conjunction with the U.S. Attorney's offices around the country. Members of the council, we at the department have done this important work with the help of and in partnership with many federal, state, local, tribal, and non-governmental partners, which include Health and Human Services, CMS, some of the agencies at the council table today, the Medicaid fraud control units, state and local prosecutors' offices, state adult protective services, state long-term care ombudsman, National Consumer Voice, law enforcement, and emergency medical services nationwide, to name a few. Through the department's initiatives and across the United States, with the help of 94 elder justice coordinators across the country, the department has daily dedicated prosecutors in every district who are focused on elder justice work. I will share with this council a few of the cases which highlight the important nursing home enforcement work that we are doing across the nation. Just last week, the department's Elder Justice Initiative announced that it filed a civil Federal False Claims Act case against American Health Foundation, known as AHF, its affiliates, and 3 nursing homes in Ohio and Pennsylvania. In its complaint, the United States alleged that 3 AHF nursing homes provided grossly substandard services that failed to meet the required standards of care. specifically by not maintaining adequate staffing, a theme we've heard a lot about today on this panel, and we'll hear more, failing to follow infection control protocols, and by providing their residents with unnecessary medications, including antibiotic, antipsychotic, anti-anxiety, and hypnotic drugs. The United States complaint also provides specific allegations of how this grossly substandard care harmed these nursing home residents. For instance, the complaint alleged that one facility resident was admitted with a history of self-harm and was hospitalized after slashing his wrist while in the facility's care. Yet, when the resident returned to this facility, nursing home staff allegedly again ignored the warning signs and failed to provide this gentleman with desperately needed psychiatric services. Mere weeks after being readmitted to this AHF facility, this resident committed suicide by hanging himself from a bedsheet in one of the facility's shower rooms. Last May, the Department's Elder Justice Initiative announced that it settled a civil False Claims Act case with Georgia-based Saba Senior Care and related entities for over $11.2 million, based on allegations that Saba billed the Medicare program for rehabilitation services that were not reasonable, not necessary, or even skilled, and to resolve allegations that Saba billed the Medicare and Medicaid program for grossly substandard skilled nursing services. This settlement resolves allegations that for 10 years, between 2008 and 2018, Saba knowingly submitted false claims for payment to Medicare and Medicaid for grossly substandard nursing services, including that Saba failed to have sufficient staffing in certain facilities, failed to follow appropriate pressure ulcer protocols, and failed to appropriately administer medication to some of its residents. Given the particularly egregious nature of some of these cases at issue and the potential resident harm, nursing home defendants frequently enter into what is known as quality corporate integrity agreements with HHS's Office of Inspector General, at the same time that they settle a False Claims Act case with the Department of Justice. For example, as part of this Saba civil settlement, Saba entered into a 5-year quality of care corporate integrity agreement with HHS OIG, where Saba is required to have a comprehensive compliance program with systems in place to address quality of resident care and, in particular, a provision regarding staffing. In the really most egregious cases, the department has and will pursue criminal prosecutions of nursing homes and their owners and operators who commit financial fraud and/or provide grossly substandard care to their residents. For example, in January of this year, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey and the department's TAC division charged Joseph Schwartz with failing to collect, truthfully account for, and pay over $38 million in payroll taxes owed to the IRS on behalf of his employees as required by law. Schwartz owned and operated the New Jersey-based Skyline Management Group, LLC, and several related Skyline companies, which in turn owned and managed 95 healthcare and rehabilitation facilities operating in at least 11 states. If convicted, Schwartz faces a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison for each count of willful failure to collect and pay employment taxes, 5 years in prison for each count of tax evasion, and if convicted, 10 additional years in prison for each count of failure to file a benefit plan report. And in February of this year, the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Pennsylvania indicted Susan Gilbert, the former administrator of a Mount Lebanon skilled nursing facility, on charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States, healthcare fraud, and obstruction of a federal audit. In this case, according to the indictment, between 2018 and 2020, Gilbert and co-conspirators deprived seniors of needed resident care by using inflated nursing hours, falsifying time cards, and other schemes that they concealed with 2 separate sets of books. According to the indictment, Gilbert and/or co-conspirators directed administrative and management level nursing staff and other employees to clock in for shifts, but not actually work these shifts, and paid bonuses to staff if they clocked in as instructed. This alleged conduct put facility residents at risk by only providing a dangerously low level of staffing just before COVID swept across the country. This resulted in paper compliance and left residents without sufficient staff to care for their basic needs. The department is committed not only to its work in nursing home enforcement, but also to training elder justice professionals to prevent, identify, and report elder abuse in our nation's nursing homes. Through the department's programmatic efforts, the department has trained federal and state prosecutors, law enforcement, emergency medical services for issues of suspected abuse all around the country, not only identifying abuse, but where and how to report such abuse. In closing, the department is actively engaged in bringing to justice those who provide grossly substandard services to our nation's vulnerable nursing home residents. And we remain committed to using all appropriate tools and pathways to investigate, prosecute, and prevent abuse of our nation's elderly in nursing homes. We also remain committed to training elder justice professionals nationwide. As one government, we all have an obligation to ensure the nation's most vulnerable receive quality of care and enjoy quality of life during their nursing home stays, which for many residents is at the end of their lives when they are most dependent on others for their most basic care. Ensuring that nursing homes meet quality regulatory and physical plant requirements falls within the mission of many of us at the council table today. At the department, we look forward to working with each of you on the council and your agency designees in service of our collective mission to combat elder abuse in our nation's nursing homes. At a time when the lessons of COVID-19, the urging of the Biden administration, and the work of the national academies are all pointing to the fact that our collective action is urgently needed. Now, we share with CMS this view is the time to work together. We have the opportunity, and critically, we have the responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you for that call to action and for sharing all of the work that the Department of Justice is doing to ensure accountability for nursing homes. Our final speaker on this panel is Lori Smetanka, who will share a resident-centered perspective on the recent nursing home reform announcement and the needs for ongoing enforcement. Lori, let me turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Barkov, and thank you and good morning to members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. As stated, I'm Lori Smetanka. I'm the Executive Director of the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. The Consumer Voice is a national nonprofit advocacy organization that works with and on behalf of individuals receiving long-term care and services to achieve quality care, quality of life, and protection of rights. We are also proud to host and operate the National Long-Term Care Ombudsman Resource Center through a grant from the Administration for Community Living, where we provide training, technical assistance, and support to state and local long-term care ombudsman programs. Through their work, Ombudsman Program representatives provide critical advocacy, support, information, and resources to long-term care facility residents and their families. Thank you for inviting me to speak today and for including this panel focused on nursing home issues. For more than 25 years, I've worked in this field where I have had the opportunity to talk with many residents, families, ombudsmen, facility staff, and others about the experiences of residents in long-term care facilities. A recurring theme, which research and data also clearly show and support, is that the single most important element for ensuring that residents receive the care and services that they need is having the necessary staff in a facility. Adequacy of staff includes numbers of staff, skills mix, and training. When there are not enough staff to provide care, residents may not get out of bed for hours or even days. They have long wait times to be helped to the bathroom, often resulting in the person urinating or defecating themselves, and then waiting longer for someone to help clean and change them. Antipsychotic drugs are inappropriately given to residents to control behavior or for the convenience of staff. Teeth aren't brushed, and residents who need assistance moving and turning often develop pressure sores as they lie in the same position for countless hours. Residents tell us that showers are regularly skipped due to short staffing. So instead of receiving 2 showers a week, for example, one person may receive 1 or sometimes none. At the end of her life, my grandmother, who lived in a nursing home and needed help with eating, would need specific assistance to finish her plate of food. When I would visit and would help feed her, it would take 20 to 30 minutes or more for her to finish her plate. As a staff member caring for 20 residents, a common occurrence in today's nursing homes, would be hard-pressed to spend that amount of time helping one resident eat. We learned during the pandemic that many facilities are highly dependent on the informal care that families provide when they are on site. Short staffing also puts great stress on the staff themselves, who are at increased risk of injury and often have to make the difficult choice of deciding which residents to assist and what kinds of assistance they can provide. Shortcuts get taken and mistakes are more frequently made. Staff also don't have the opportunity to connect on a personal level with residents because they're rushing to get on to the next task. The critical shortage in staffing that currently exists in many areas today is part of a longer systemic problem, as you've heard from the other speakers. Low wages and benefits, poor working conditions, and inadequate training and support are some of the factors that lead to high turnover and difficulty attracting new workers into this field. We cannot allow this broken system to continue. Immediate changes need to be made that include minimum staffing requirements and increased accountability and transparency for facilities, both to meet quality standards and to account for the use of public dollars. That's why we commend the Biden administration for the bold set of reforms proposed in late February that would begin to address these issues, and we support their implementation. And we thank the administration for including residents and family members in the conversations about what is needed to make quality care better in long-term care facilities. Despite well-established research showing that nursing homes with higher averages of nursing care per day have higher overall ratings, better health inspection ratings, and fewer instances of abuse, we continue to have weak federal policies around nursing home staffing. Facilities are required to have sufficient staff, a standard that's vague, subjective, and difficult to measure. As average daily staffing decreases, so does a facility's overall rating and performance in health inspections, and incidences of abuse rise. In the nursing home reforms proposed by the administration, a key element, as you heard, is the creation of a federal minimum staffing standard based on the findings of a new study that's being commissioned. Any staffing standard must include a baseline or a minimum below which a facility cannot go, and must also include adjustments for resident acuity to assure higher staffing levels when residents have higher care needs. Facilities must also be held accountable for meeting minimum quality standards. Penalties for not complying must be meaningful and appropriate for deficiencies cited, and we cannot allow chronic bad actors to continue owning and operating facilities. There could and should be better federal agency coordination around facility and corporate monitoring, data sharing and analysis, and referrals of cases and complaints. Increased collaboration, including among the agencies on this council and the programs you oversee, would leverage the power and resources of the federal government to both systemically and individually address bad actors in the system and would improve conditions for residents. Additionally, we must insist on greater transparency and accountability for the billions of dollars of public funds that nursing homes receive. The nursing home industry claims that it does not receive enough money to hire the necessary staff, nor to provide high-quality care to which residents are entitled. The truth, however, is that shell games such as the submission of incomplete and inaccurate cost reports and strategies such as the use of related party transactions have been employed to divert attention from how money is really spent and to make financial accountability more difficult. Information that is available, however, reveals a profitable industry that diverts resources away from direct care to profits and other expenses. It's essential then for the administration's proposed reforms around transparency to be implemented. CMS should implement sections of the Affordable Care Act passed more than 10 years ago and still not fully implemented, which require transparency in nursing home ownership and finances. And additionally, facilities should be required to submit audited, consolidated cost reports that are reviewed by CMS. We also encourage the administration to require that a minimum percentage of facility revenue be spent on direct care to residents. One resident who's lived in a nursing home for more than a decade told me that she sees the changes that occur when her facility is bought and sold. She said suddenly there are fewer staff working on the floor, fewer supplies available, and lower quality items, especially in the food department. Billions of our tax dollars are given to nursing homes each year, but little to no scrutiny is placed on how those dollars are spent. Essential to minimum staffing standards is ensuring that dollars go where intended, towards patient care. There's been much rhetoric from the nursing home industry that they view implementation of a minimum staffing standard as an unfunded mandate. Excuse me. The law is clear, however, that the Secretary of Health and Human Services has full authority to set standards that ensure nursing homes provide each resident with high quality care, that Medicare and Medicaid payments are spent on resident care. That would include the setting of a minimum staffing standard. Instead of an unfunded mandate, what we have is a long-standing unfulfilled mandate for residents, one that entitles each resident to attain or maintain his or her highest practicable level of physical, mental, and psychosocial well-being. Nursing home owners and operators voluntarily agree to meet this standard in return for federal funding. While providers have received the funding, nursing home residents have largely not received the care and services to meet this promise. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share these remarks. And I thank and commend the administration for prioritizing these issues and putting forth their important reforms that, when implemented, can make a critical difference for residents. So next, I think we'll see a short video where we'd like you to hear directly from residents about their experiences when there are not enough staff available. These residents that you're going to be hearing from participated in a dialogue hosted by the Consumer Voice in late 2021.
Well, I think in my facility that if they can improve on the staffing level, because that I think would help with infection control. Because when you have 2 CNAs covering 60 residents, it's very difficult to be as tight with infection control as it should be. Because they're
2
running back and
CNAs
forth.
for 60 residents?
60 residents, yes.
Wow.
And that's usually every shift. And I think that if they increase their wages, that would help as well.
Okay. So if they're able to take care of the basics, then they could start to address things that would maybe help your quality of life.
Correct.
Am I hearing that right?
It's almost the staffing is worse than the pandemic itself. Because it's very
Staffing,
it's
that's
very
huge.
straining on the staff, on the CNAs, which trickles down to us.
Sure.
Obviously.
Yeah.
We have been very short-staffed this entire year. People are leaving in every department. We're down to, I would say, between a quarter to half staff of what we used to have.
Wow.
During the third shift, we've got a nurse who's taking care of at least 35 patients between where I am and a floor above me.
Wow.
But we have 20 residents to an aide, and if you are needing more assistance than one person, it means long wait times. So that increase in staffing would be great.
I only have 2 girls on aides, and sometimes they're on split shift, but they have to go upstairs, and there's 22 people on a floor, so it sometimes makes it bad.
The ratio per resident, there are many days where I have 10 minutes or less per day with an aide, and it's usually about 10 minutes per day per nurse, per day with the nurse.
I would actually like to see a federal mandated laws that protect our nursing homes that would say that there can only be so many residents per nurse, so many residents per CNA. I believe that the prison population has stricter rules than nursing homes. So I think that's something that's badly needed, that our nursing staff, in case of an emergency, if there's a full code and there's not enough nurses, you have to worried that your family member is not going to get seen or get taken care of. So I really do believe that we need to do something about that legislatively.
Thank you. And I'll turn it back to you, Allison.
Thank you so much, Lori, for sharing your expertise and most importantly, sharing the voices of people who are most impacted. Council members, we're going to now seg into a 15-minute question and answer segment. We'll keep track of time so we can stay on schedule, and our technicians will now unmute you so you can raise your hands and ask questions for the panelists. This was an incredibly powerful panel covering a lot of really important strategies that we're using not only in a whole of government approach, but really in partnership with the whole range of stakeholders who are impacted by this. And so let me see. Okay, great. We already have, welcome Ron, and welcome to the council. And I am really excited for you to jump in. So let's turn it to you to start with the first question.
Well, thank you, Allison, and thank you to the council. It is an honor to join you all in this effort. And I, in that regard, ask the question, how can legal aid attorneys help in the work you do?
Well, I can start there. Certainly, residents of long-term care facilities need access to legal support on a regular basis. They often are threatened with discharge. They need help to assert their rights related to directing people to be their agents under power of attorney. They often have issues with guardianship, and unfortunately, they don't have good and regular access to legal counsel. So legal services programs play a very critical part in supporting residents' rights protections and helping residents achieve quality care and quality of life. Coordinating with long-term ombudsman programs is a really great way that legal services programs can assist. And certainly having programs prioritize issues related to that exist in long-term care facilities would be greatly beneficial.
Thank you.
And hi, it's Will. I'll just say really quickly for us that we really value hearing about what issues and trends that you see popping up. You're sometimes closer to the folks with lived experience and on the ground a little more than we are sometimes. We like to get information from anywhere and everywhere that we can about what trends you're seeing, what if there's new issues coming up that CMS needs to be aware of. Very happy to get connected with you and make sure that we have that information sharing occurring.
Are there mechanisms in place to facilitate those sorts of reports?
Yeah, there are, and we have a group that handles exactly that kind of thing. But we can you can always start by reaching out to me as well, and make sure you get my contact info, and we'll get everybody plugged in where they need to go.
Thank you.
And Ron, let me just say from the department's perspective, obviously, as I mentioned in my remarks, we have elder justice coordinators in 94 districts, and we have these units of multidisciplinary teams that work to identify problems in nursing homes, as Will pointed out, boots on the ground. And so to the extent that there is a problem, referral, information sharing, not only with the ombudsman, but with the elder justice coordinator in the district, or you can obviously reach to me. The department is very committed to following up anything that may be problematic and actionable from our standpoint. So we look forward to the partnership.
And this is Allison from ACL, and I'll just add that we also fund legal services both on the disability and aging side. As I mentioned, as Will talked about, and I think Lori touched on, not only do people have a right, and are we focused on making sure people are safe and getting quality care in nursing homes, but there are people who are in nursing homes who can and want to live in the community. It's something that our ombudsmen work on, our protection and advocacy networks. This is not just older adults. There are also younger people with disabilities in nursing nursing homes. Our ombudsmen work with those populations. And that's another place, Ron, we'd love to really make sure in local communities that the legal services is connected with our disability and aging networks on the ground. So we can follow up on that, and welcome, and really, really glad that you're part of this.
Thanks so much.
Okay, great. It looks like I see another hand from Talia Sergi. Let me kick it over to you for your question.
Hi, thank you, Allison. Thank you to the committee and to the speakers. I'm just very excited to hear about the work that you're doing. I represent AmeriCorps, which is a national service organization, and am the director of AmeriCorps Seniors. So as you were speaking, what came to mind for me is understanding how we continue to engage volunteers who do different types of engagement activities and support for residents. How do we continue to help them to know what to look for, how to raise flags, and how can they also help people in their community, family members, understand this too? So is there any training that is provided for them?
I know, thanks for your comments. I know that there have been historically a number of AmeriCorps volunteers that have been successfully placed with long-term care ombudsman programs across the country that have very successfully worked with those programs around advocacy, education, and community outreach. Through the work of the Ombudsman Resource Center, we absolutely have, and through the Consumer Voice, we have training and resources that are available that AmeriCorps volunteers can access. We have webinars and that we offer and resources that can be downloaded on our website, and we can share that information with you and would be happy to do that. And ombudsman programs are very involved in working with communities around outreach and training, including with residents and family members and other members of the community about rights and quality issues in long-term care facilities.
Great, thank you so much.
Natalia, I'd also jump in and say that the department at HHS.gov has a number of trainings for the red flags of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and we've trained, as I mentioned, a number of different elder justice professionals, and would be happy to share that training with you and to train any of your team. So thank you for your engagement.
Thank you. Look forward to connecting with you both.
Great, thank you. And we are taking notes and all these things where we are saying we will follow up and connect you. I promise you we will do that. Let's see, I see Ben Felton. Ben, great to see you. And please jump in.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you to all of our presenters. What a fabulous presentation, really thought-provoking. Some of it was really hard to hear, but very necessary, so just thank you. First, as a comment, I just want to make sure that I express the Social Security Administration's interest in being involved, especially with the long-term care ombudsman programs around the state. In the states, we have a presence all over the country via our network of regional offices, area offices, and field offices. So we would like to make sure that we are making relationships with the long-term care ombudsman around the country. So any collaborations that we could be involved in, please do count us in. I did have a question, and that was about financial exploitation of residents in nursing homes. I know we talked about abuse and things like the use of drugs, antipsychotic drugs, but can anyone say a word or two or a couple of comments about the financial exploitation of residents in nursing home facilities?
I will start and then hand it over to others who will be able to say more. But aside, obviously, from many of those activities being crimes, we do have conditions of participation through the Medicare program that prohibit and guarantee that residents have certain rights over their financial freedom and the use of their own financial resources, and also prohibit certain practices that would be that would violate their ability to do so. That's definitely a focus for us. It is something that anytime it occurs, we take incredibly seriously, and is a very high severity issue anytime we locate it. I think a lot of this, though, will be over in my colleague Susan's department over at DOJ, and I want to make sure you can talk about it.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, so financial exploitation of older adults occurs not only in the community, to your point, Allison, but also in nursing homes. And so in some of the cases that we bring, we see that older adults in nursing homes might be the victim of some type of financial exploitation scam that you'll probably hear about all in the second hour, anything from, a prize scam, a text scam, et cetera, et cetera. We also see in some of our grossly substandard care cases that part of the financial component of the fraud, which is also part of the grossly substandard care, obviously, is stealing from residents. And that may be members of the care force, that is to say the caregivers, but it can also be management and operators who are stealing from something like the resident trust fund. And this resident trust fund is something that each resident can have a couple of $1,000s to buy special things for themselves, in the store in the nursing home. And even sometimes that is taken from them and funneled into, funds that the owner takes. So we see this both in terms of residents being victims like the broader community. We also see it targeted within the cases themselves. And we obviously do everything in our power to stop that.
And I think this is an area of opportunity where different agencies and programs can work together to support residents. Certainly ombudsmen become aware of financial exploitation issues and financial abuse. Adult Protective Services in many states has a role in this area as well. Disability rights programs, I know, are engaged in this area. So there's a really good opportunity for sharing of information, referrals back and forth between programs, and including your representatives too as well, Ben, Social Security, in these conversations to look at how they could work together to address these issues.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ben. I think we have time for one more question, if there are any more questions from council members.
It looks like we have one from Suzanne McGovern.
Okay, great. Suzanne.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this wonderful panel. On the subject of financial exploitation and nursing homes, I just wanted to add that there have been, or we've talked at a lot of nursing homes about keeping tabs on where your investment accounts are. And if you're missing a statement or a statement goes missing, or your password gets stolen or goes missing, those are very serious things to think about, change, and ask about, because we have seen a lot statements being stolen and then accounts being taken. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention while it was brought up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Okay, I think we probably should start moving to the second panel. I really want to thank all of our panelists for this really important discussion. As Will said, we're kind of at the beginning of this initiative. We have a lot of work to do together, and it sounds like there is a lot of interest across the panel and the council members on really connecting on some next steps, whether it's legal advocacy, how do we share information, how do we leverage resources out there, how do we deal with quality of care, how do we deal with making sure people who can and want to live in the community are transitioned, and how do we tie in and make sure that the work that we're doing to prevent fraud looks at people across the board. So thank you for this great conversation, and thank you in advance, Lori, Will, and Susan, for being a resource and for all the follow-up emails we're going to be sending you later today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So with that, we are going to turn to our second panel, which is called Effective Messaging to Prevent Senior Scams and Fraud. And on this panel, we will be hearing from Dr. Marty DeLima, who is a research assistant professor from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And then we will be hearing from Jolene Gunther, who's the Senior Strategic Policy Advisor from AARP BankSafe. And then finally from Sarah Sinden, who's the Manager of Custom Education Strategy from the UK Finance Take 5 campaign. So we will start off now with Dr. Marty DeLima, and let me turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me and can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much to members of the EJCC for inviting me to present on some of the work that I've done with the Federal Trade Commission on government imposter scams. And what I'm going to present today is actually a mixed methods analysis. So we did a qualitative analysis of consumer complaints of the Social Security imposter scam, as well as did a quantitative analysis comparing those who reported victimization by that scam to those that reported that they were targeted but did not pay money. So I want to first thank the U.S. Social Security Administration for funding this research as part of their Retirement and Disability Research Consortium. And also the opinions and conclusions that I express today are solely my own, and they do not represent the opinions or policy of SSA, the FTC, or any other government agency. So this is a little chart that I pulled from the Federal Trade Commission's public Tableau dashboard. It maps the prevalence of consumer reports of different types of imposter scams since 2018. And you can see in that orange line there, there's two really prominent peaks. And that really is driven by the prevalence at these times of the Social Security imposter scam. And it did take a big hit around COVID lockdowns, but then quickly rebounded. And now it's, somewhat overtaken by business imposter scams. But really what I want to talk about in this presentation is how these criminals convinced many people, including older adults, that they were in trouble with the federal government due to crimes that they supposedly committed. So first was I was interested in persuasion tactics. What are the criminals saying and doing to appear that they really truly are representative of the SSA or some other federal government agency? And the second question were, what are the demographic and contextual correlates of victimization? So what differentiates those that were victims of the scam and those that were not? So the data for this study comes from the Consumer Sentinel, which is an investigative cyber tool that law enforcement agencies can use to identify individuals who've been harmed by fraud and identity theft. The data is kind of pulled together by the Federal Trade Commission, although there are contributors include 50 plus federal agencies and nonprofit organizations and states. So it's a really great data resource in addition to being a tool for law enforcement. For this study, we restricted only the complaints that went directly to the Federal Trade Commission. So this does not include all the majority of complaints that went to the Social Security Administration itself. So when I was looking through and doing the qualitative analysis of the consumer complaint narratives, where the consumer wrote about what happened to them, describing it in their own words, I identified 3 of CLDNI's 6 elements of persuasion: reciprocity, scarcity or urgency, and authority. I also identified one more, and that's secrecy. And secrecy is something that we see in many different types of scams in order to really control the victim. So I'm just going to briefly talk about how the fraud criminals used each of these persuasion techniques based on what I learned from the case narratives. So authority is probably the most prevalent in a government imposter scam. The criminals use number spoofing. So if the consumer were to actually Google the phone number that called them, their local SSA office or the federal SSA office phone number would come up. They also referenced multiple federal agencies, like they said that the DEA was involved, the FBI was involved in the case, really to elicit fear. The criminals were clever and they gave fake names. They said to the target, I'm going to give you my badge number and your case ID number. This is important. Write it down. Although these numbers were just fabricated and meaningless. They even told the consumer that they were under surveillance. And in some rare cases, they actually did have the consumer's actual Social Security number, which to me indicates that some of them might have been working off of lists, but all of that added authenticity to the story that the criminals were telling their targets. So the reciprocity principle worked like this. The original agent on the phone would say to the person, you're in big trouble. We've, found, drugs and cars rented in your name. You've committed crimes. And of course, the victim or the target says, no, that's not me. There's a mistake. And immediately the criminals switch their tune and they say, I believe you. I'm on your side. I'm going to help you clear your name and avoid arrest. But if I'm going to help you, you need to help me. So they kind of are pretending that they're on the target side and that they're going to work together. Another one was urgency. And we see this in many, many different scam types. You need to act right away. The government is going to freeze your assets. And you have to follow our directions, and the criminals are about to catch wind of this and they're going to come after you and their family. Again, using fear to provoke urgency. And then secrecy. The participants or the targets of these scams were told to not tell anyone. They were told never put the call on speaker, never put yourself on mute. And they were coached, word by word, what to say to bank tellers, to retailers on how to, divert their attention or to convince those people who are concerned that everything is okay. So in terms of the quantitative analysis, comparing the consumers who said that they lost money to those who said that they did not, we found that the vast majority of consumers were not victims. So only 4.2% who reported were victims. We find that younger adults were more likely to report victimization, but it was older adults that reported greater losses on average. And that trend is pretty consistent with the Sentinel data overall. We used Census Bureau neighborhood characteristics and brought it into this data set. And we found that consumers who resided more in Black, Hispanic, and American Indian communities were more likely to report victimization versus no loss. However, they did report lower losses on average, so lower dollar amounts. And that we also applied a sentiment analysis to the narratives to understand how consumers' emotions relate to whether they were a victim or not. And we found that emotions associated with greater trust, anticipation, and anger were all associated with victimization and a loss amount. What's interesting is that all of those emotions were reported after the fraud occurred. So we can't say that those emotions were driving susceptibility or likelihood of paying, but we do see that they are related after the incident. But if you were to ask me what really is driving loss amount, like what variable was most significant? And I would have to say it's how the consumer paid. In fact, you can see the majority, around 70%, paid with a gift card. However, these other methods of payment, cash, cryptocurrency, and wire transfer, had the greatest median losses. So what does this mean for consumer education and intervention? So the first thing I want to point out was that number spoofing. So that really worked to immediately engender trust. The consumer saw a phone number on their phone, it said it was the SSA, they were much more likely to trust it. So we need to continue to remind and educate consumers that we cannot trust caller ID, that phone numbers, even official phone numbers, even their family and friends' phone numbers can be spoofed. I'm really grateful to the FCC for their work in the regulatory actions against voice over internet protocol call providers who allow these calls to reach American consumers. I think we actually we have the most benefit when we stop the message from reaching the consumer in the first place. So those early interventions, that will, I think, go the furthest in terms of consumer protection. And then also there's a lot of discussion on warning signs. Can we help educate the majority of consumers, especially in this scam, who are paying using gift cards? My graduate students and I went to multiple retailers in the Twin Cities area and photographed some of the warning signs that we observed. And you can see that they really ranged in quality and in visibility. Some were vague, others were ripped, and others, the print was so small, you had to practically use a magnifying glass in order to read it. Other messaging was a little bit larger, was very clear. However, sometimes that messaging can even get lost in the sea of different gift cards on the gift card kiosks. So in case you're wondering where that sign is, it's right here, perpendicular to the consumer's eye gaze. And then other signs were a little bit better. In fact, surprisingly, we thought the ones that were more low budget looking, printed off just a printer, maybe by a manager, actually caught your attention. And then another retailer actually has a warning that comes up on the credit card reader, and the consumer has to do an action. They have to click continue in order to proceed with their gift card transaction. So again, enhancing these signs, making them more visible, putting in stops like this on the credit card reader, all of that can go a long way, I think, in kind of stopping the consumer in the act, assuming they're in the emotional state to be able to take in that information. And again, this retailer had so many warning signs, but unfortunately, these warning signs were only on the money services counter. They weren't in where the majority of consumers were driven to buy products, which is self-checkout. So again, how do we kind of integrate fraud warning signs in the self-checkout areas, or are we going to restrict consumers that they can't buy gift cards in self-checkout? So like I said, the bigger losses occurred from wiring funds to the criminals and in cryptocurrency ATMs. A lot of these consumers were told to go to a local gas station and put in cash into a cryptocurrency ATM. And from what I read, there were no warning signs related to fraud or gift card fraud. So that is, I think, an open playing field for consumer education. We also need to empower frontline retailers to say something. They need to feel confident and that they have the authority to say no to consumers where they are suspicious that this person is participating in a scam. And that will require engagement from leadership from these individuals or these companies. And then also perhaps another intervention is just lowering the limits. So instead of being able to put whatever dollar amount you want on a particular card, limit the number of cards that can be purchased and how much can be loaded. And that would just, even if someone is a victim, at least they lose more money. And then finally, I want to say that if we can encourage the gift card issuers and the payment processors who have kind of insight into where the card is being loaded with value and then that value is being redeemed. And if they can do more to identify and stop those fraudulent transactions, I think that will even go further than just signs in the retailers, because it's really hard to reach everyone. So with that, I want to thank everyone, and I'm happy to answer questions after the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that great information, and we really appreciate what you have just shared. Our next panelist is Jolene Gunther, who will share AARP's work on combating gift card fraud and effective messaging techniques to prevent and mitigate fraud. Turning it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And I think someone's uploading my slides. Perfect, thanks so much. My name's Jolene Gunther. I am a director at AARP running the Bank Safe program, and thank you so much for the kind invitation to speak here today. I come from 3 generations of community bankers. I'm a social worker and I'm an attorney, and I have spent my entire career really dedicated to improving the lives of older adults. 1 in 5 are defrauded over the course of their lives, with the average victim losing $120,000. It is a stark reality that has motivated not only myself, but my AARP colleagues to do more. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about AARP's Bank Safe initiative, its recent report on the prevalence and impact of gift card fraud, and how we are leveraging the industry retail partnerships to address the issues. Next slide. AARP's commitment is to fiercely defend older adults, and that's really shown through our 2-prong approach. Our consumer efforts include Fraud Watch Network's helpline and the REST program, where consumers can receive support and guidance and resources, but it also includes direct-to-consumer materials like the fraud scam tracking map that you see here. On the industry collaboration front, we know the industry is the last line of defense. People are most likely to see exploitation and fraud that are family members, but the industry also sees that. So that means cashiers, tellers, investment advisors, store managers, and more. And what BankSafe does is we empower our industry partners to be that critical line of defense. And we do that in 3 different ways. We gather and then we test promising practices of intervention from across the globe. We also create tools and resources with the industry that makes it easier for customer-facing employees to protect all of their customers, as Marty previously mentioned. And then lastly, and perhaps most prominently, is our award-winning BankSafe training. Next slide. So BankSafe is also a powerful distribution channel. And with that, it provides these business-to-business interventions. We've partnered with more than 200 leaders in the industry to help us build data-driven tools, and then 2,000 individuals from regulators, financial institutions, frontline employees, adult protective services, and more helped us review these. And these tools then allowed us to build those trusted relationships with industry players. Next slide. And I mentioned our training. When we first launched in 2019, we had 2 courses, one for banks and then one for credit unions. In 2020, we added a 3rd course for financial advisors. And then understanding the importance of trusted relationships within the financial sector, we partnered with a number of trade associations as our initial distribution partners. And these organizations help recruit these banks, credit unions, and broker-dealers to use our ARP training. And that industry insider stamp of approval, combined with ARP's strong reputation around the needs of older adults, really proved to be that powerful combination. Next slide. So the industry impact we're achieving is notable. Industry leaders are changing their behavior as we push out these interventions that we know work. And this is because of how we position the interventions as a smart business practice, or what they call in the industry a risk management strategy. And we also build a business case of why preventing fraud matters to their bottom line. And what you see below is just a sampling of some of the larger financial institutions that have begun adopting ARP's recommended practices. Collectively, these organizations alone serve 200 million consumers. And let me share one example. You'll see data analytics on the left-hand side. As part of our work with one of the large mega banks, they're investing significant resources into machine learning and other smart technology to help spot fraud. Next slide. And so now what we have is thousands of frontline employees who interact with consumers that are using our intervention tools that are proven by research to be effective. Next slide. And one of the tools they've embraced is taking our award-winning training courses. And while our goal is really rooted in protecting the interests of older adults, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, and I'd be in trouble with my team as well, if I didn't mention that our courses have been recognized with over a dozen awards, not only in industry categories, but technology, training, adult education, and even video production categories. Next slide. But most importantly, BankSafe works. We asked Virginia Tech to perform a rigorous assessment to quantify the impact of training on preventing financial exploitation among financial industry staff. So their research team then assessed the difference between the frontline employees in the industry who took ARP's training and those who didn't and took a different type of training. And they found that employees who completed the BankSafe training saved 16 times the amount of money than those who took a different type of training. People who also took our course were 4 times as more confident and successful in spotting it and reporting exploitation than their peers were. And additional insights from Virginia Tech also discovered which of our interventions were most effective, further improving our impact. And given our proven success with the financial industry, the FTC approached us about helping fight gift card fraud. And Lois, I have to tell you that Katie Daffin and Thomas Harris have been tremendous partners in our pursuit to help the retail sector stop gift card fraud. Which brings me back to the question, why am I here talking to you about gift card fraud? Next slide. It's a problem. Gift card sales have soared, and they're projected to reach $221 billion by 2024. And as sales continue to climb, so does gift card fraud. I think you should be on the next slide. Thanks. So with that, and Marty talked about the FTC's Consumer Centennial Report, and what it shows here is that gift cards now rank in the top 5 most frequently used payment methods in reported instances of scams. This is behind credit cards, debit cards, payment apps, and wire transfers, many of which BankSafe is actively combating through partnerships with financial institutions. And also with that is that older adults are more than half as likely to fall for a gift card scam than their counterparts in their 20s. And when they do, they lose twice as much more money. So it's a problem. Next slide. I co-authored a report that ARP published earlier this year with our Executive Vice President, Deborah Whitman, on the most effective things retailers can do to combat gift card fraud. And not just retailers, but the entire retail sector. The findings of our paper are based on one-on-one interviews with over 30 industry representatives and a comprehensive review of research and data from the FTC, industry associations, ARP, and other nonprofits. And reflected on this slide are just some of the organizations that were generous enough to share some of their time as well as their insights with us. Next slide. So let me touch on 2 big things that were included in our report. First is the fact that there is no single silver bullet to this problem. It's our collective problem. Consumers play a role in being aware of potential scams. Retailers and gift card distributors play a role in helping stop that suspicious transaction. Gift card associations and technology companies that create and develop retail point of sale systems also play a key role in advancing those tools, as well as the education to stop that exploitation. And then nonprofits like ARP play a role in arming retailers with the tools and the resources to help them better work with consumers and really take the right steps to help them. And then ultimately, industry regulators and law enforcement are that critical link in prosecuting those criminals and also setting the industry expectations in fraud protection. Next slide. So our paper identifies 3 trends that are key to solving this issue together. And they are technology advancements in point of sale systems, better educating and empowering consumers, and arming employees with a better knowledge, skills, and tools to effectively spot and stop the scam. So I want to talk a little bit about each of these. Next slide. So enhancing point of sale technology, as you can see, this is a quote from our paper. Point of sale enhancements help protect consumers, but they also have that added employee awareness benefits. You can see some of the examples of these enhancements of point of sale systems. The one that I found the most interesting was a retailer sharing with us that if their point of sale flags a suspicious transaction, there's offsite security that's able to focus on in-store security cameras on that register in question to assess the situation. And they can instantly then alert store management to intervene. But I also wanted at the same time to flag an additional insight from our report. And that's the concern that as major retailers enhance their point of sale systems, criminals will then focus on downstream, those small and mid-sized retailers who are less likely to invest in such advanced technology. Next slide.
Angeline, I'm just looking at the time. If you could wrap it up in the next 2 or so minutes, that would be great.
Sounds great. And then, of course, Marty already talked about consumer education, which is one of the ways that why we have heavily invested in Fraud Watch Network. And we know it works. 1 out of 2 times a frontline employee says something, it successfully stops the fraud. And so employee training and resources becomes critical. Key areas to focus on is what behavior signal a scam, and then how and what do we say when I suspect something is a scam versus they're confident this is a scam. And to do this, ARP did content interviews with retail employees who are bank secrecy officers, those AML officers and loss prevention officers, as well as those who had boots on the ground. And this brings us back to BankSafe. So we created a collaborative approach that addresses the problem. Seeing the impact was achieved with banks, credit unions, and financial advisors. The FTC approached us about adapting our training to address the financial products and services sold in the retail sector. So today, our full suite of content includes the recent addition, 2 new trainings, one in wire transfers and gift card fraud. And these all went live in May and are free to any retailers across the United States. And with our partners at the FTC, really were so wonderful in making introductions and opening doors for us, so that ultimately Walgreens and Best Buy agreed to be the inaugural retailers to train their employees with this new BankSafe gift card fraud training. And ultimately, our success is defined by our ability to empower our, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. You're going to want to go to the one that has the graph. Yep, there you go. Ultimately, our success is defined by our ability to empower our partners to protect older adults from fraud. The social impact we are seeing out of the BankSafe initiative is absolutely astounding. But still, we're really acutely aware of the adaptable and an evolving nature of fraud, and we're eager to continue this work in new industries as methods and tactics of fraud continue to evolve. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Allison.
Great. Thank you so much, Jillian, for that great information and for all of the great work that AARP does. And for our final panelist today, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Sinden, who will share remarks on the UK's Finance Innovative Take 5 campaign and what we can learn from this model on effective messaging to thwart scams and fraud. Sarah, turning it over to you.
Thank you very much, Alison, and thanks very much for inviting me along to talk to you all about what we've done here in the UK in terms of from a fraud and scams perspective. My career in fraud and scams started over 20 years ago and was really around the sort of unauthorized payments that people noticed on their bank statements when they came through in the post. Which makes me feel incredibly old to say that, because probably nobody gets a statement in the post now from our perspective. But moving through the years from us having chip and pin all the way through to sort of 2015, 2016, where we really started to see a complete shift in that, away from the unauthorized but into the authorized push payment sphere. And that's basically where a customer is convinced by a criminal to process a transaction by bank transfer, which obviously for us here, means, an instant transaction by faster payment. So it goes straight away. So Take 5 to Stop Fraud is a national campaign that sort of offers straightforward, impartial advice to help everybody to protect themselves from preventable financial fraud. So that's both from a consumer's perspective. We also produce collateral for businesses as well. And really, the whole reason for launching this campaign and the reason why it's called Take 5 is because when we spoke to people that had fallen for scams, and I say fallen because lots of people hate actually being called a victim. We know that from our sort of research, that they really don't like the idea that they've been victimized. We had to give that sort of confidence and that confident challenge to people And where Take 5 came from was that people said, you know, it's only a few minutes afterwards, and I thought about it, and then I thought, oh no, something doesn't feel right. And that's really where Take 5 was born. We have every major bank, law enforcement agency, and many other organisations that support Take 5 across the board. We have a Take 5 charter that sets out how signatories can provide consistent and concerted use of the campaign messaging and the logo throughout their customer communications. So really what that does is it starts to share a message, because we can all talk about fraud a lot and fraud and scams a lot. We can talk about it from lots of different agencies. But unless we get that messaging consistent and concerted, for consumers, it's incredibly confusing. And that landscape is so very, very busy. We have a central communications campaign that provides collateral and support for, we have a Take 5 week every year, but also PR and social media activity, and a central Take 5 messaging hub, which sounds very posh way of actually saying it's our website. But literally we have, that website is able to hone and give everybody the information that they need, not just from an advice perspective, but also tools and collateral and things that they can use. So co-brandable campaign material that you can get from a toolkit. So if we could move to the next slide, or I'll trip onto the next one after that as well, because I've just done that one. So in terms of consumer attitudes are, look, fraud's a hot topic. You know, consumers are more interested, quite frankly, in the gory details of how, you know, than how they can actually protect themselves. Most have a misplaced confidence. They believe that their ability is far higher than it is, and that they would never fall for these sorts of scams. And when we talk about these types of scams, we're talking identity theft, impersonation, investment fraud, invoice scams, payment in advance, so clairvoyant scams, upfront fees for loans, purchase scams where you think you're buying something that, you know, it essentially doesn't exist, but also things like romance scams, you know, the long burn of, you know, one of those scams. It's you know, our desk research has shown that there's sort of the emotional impact of these types of frauds and how the loss of money can affect them is a driver to action. So next slide. So one of the things that we need to do in order to get people to, you know, they need to confront their misplaced confidence. We need to demonstrate it, make it personal, and provide a solution. And that's really what Take 5 is all about. It's about demonstrating how sophisticated the scammers are in their approach. You know, the social engineering that's been discussed in, you know, with the previous two speakers, how they get that information out of you, how they convince you to do things, they put the pressure on, they make you panic. But also about making it personal is about, you know, there's no shame in falling, you know, victim, because, you know, they really are advanced, these criminals. And I call them criminals. I don't like to call them scammers or fraudsters. It makes them sound, you know, like sort of cheeky, chappy types that are just trying to get away with it once or twice. You know, these people are dedicated criminals. Organised crime sits behind all of these scams. But also to show the emotional and financial consequences of, you know, being a victim of fraud. You know, for some people, it's utterly, utterly devastating, and specifically for that older population, can really have a detrimental effect on their life, on their well-being, and how they move forward afterwards. And that solution is really about, you know, stop, challenge, protect is our main mantra of our sort of Take 5 to Stop Fraud campaign. Next slide. So while we know obviously financial fraud's a big problem, we're always actually positive. We keep our tone of voice very informative, authoritative, positive, clear and concise. You have 20 words or less in which to communicate a message to a consumer, and probably even less if you're talking to businesses who are incredibly time poor and stretched for time. Therefore, by remaining sort of personal and not patronising, reassuring but not sensational about everything, we can actually talk people through and we can get them to understand the different nuances for all of these types of scam. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, it's all about simple and consistent messaging, be clear on the behaviours that we want people to adopt. You know, remember that consumers actually don't talk about fraud and they don't talk about fraud types. So me saying, you know, identity theft or impersonation scams or, you know, invoice and mandate payment in advance means absolutely nothing to them. But also talking in a way, as I've mentioned, it's criminals, not fraudsters. It's about, you know, what consumers want to know is what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. So they find it, you know, they've actually fed back to us, why don't you tell us what we should be doing? You know, you always say don't, never, shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't. It's very negative. So where we like to look at is the side where we can say, okay, let's go with the positive side. Next slide. So you, as you'll see, our primary messaging is incredibly short and to the point. You know, criminals are experts at impersonating people, organisations and the police. They spend hours researching you for their scams, hoping you'll let your guard down for just a moment. And then our key phrases are around stop, challenge, protect. Stop and take a minute, go and have a cup of tea, go and, you know, talk to a friend, talk to a family member. Just go somewhere else when you've had either that call, that email, that text message, you know, that social media post that you've seen, maybe that advert that you've seen online that you're thinking of clicking on and looking to, you know, follow some actions from. Challenging is really important. Could it be fake? Is that part of your brain where you need to sort of engage that and think, you know, and I hate to say to everybody, be suspicious of everything and everyone. But as someone that's worked in fraud and scams for over 20 years, I just can't think of another way in which to get that across to people, is to just show a real healthy skepticism of these things. Could it be fake? But building your confidence, it's okay to refuse, reject or ignore requests. You know, if someone was trying to sell you something over the phone or online and you didn't want it, then you'd say no and you wouldn't have it, you wouldn't buy it. It's exactly the same when we come to things like people asking you for your personal or your financial information. You know, please say no. Only criminals will rush or panic you to do things, you know, genuine, excuse me, organisations won't. And then lastly for us, obviously protect is about, look, if you have fallen for something, contact your bank immediately. They can generally help you. They can potentially stop any further transactions, but also by reporting it through to law enforcement at Action Fraud, that helps to share that message far wider. So that obviously, you know, the more people that see and know and the more people that hear can actually protect themselves. Next slide. So here's just a few examples of the collateral that we actually produce to help us to amplify this particular campaign. So we have leaflets, posters, lots of stuff and activity that we do across the board, which is made available to people from our website. But we do work in a lot of partnerships. So there's been a lot of talk about gift card fraud. It's something that also that we see here. So we're working with the supermarkets on their gift card stand signage. We're keeping it very short and very sweet. Has somebody asked you to buy these vouchers in order to pay a debt or to pay a fee or a loan? Because as I say, it needs to be sharp, it needs to be clear and it needs to be short because people just won't take any notice of it otherwise. Next slide. So we also have a number of things on our website in terms of we have the scam quiz that people can do. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where, you know, we get all of our messaging out and across, but it's not just about those. So as I've already mentioned, it's about working with supermarkets, working with partners, working with trade associations, age groups in terms of Age UK here in the UK that works with a lot of the older population. But also we've got ATM messaging. So across the board with our banking industry work, you can see the messaging on a more regular basis. One of the things that we do is a hell of a lot of research in terms of, is our campaign working? Is it getting out to the right people? And the one thing that we do know from our recent research is the more people that see the Take 5 to Stop Fraud campaign and the Stop, Challenge, Protect messaging, the more likely they are to stop and challenge and protect, which is the ultimate goal at the end of the day. Next slide. I've popped a couple of links here because one of the key things that we do is we share all of our collateral and all of our information with everybody for use. And appreciate that obviously this is a UK driven campaign, but we do have an international licensing agreement where we can actually license the use of Take 5 far wider internationally. So, I mean, please do take a look. As I say, the information that we have is far and wide. It covers a multitude of different types of scams, and the information that we provide to protect people. And as I always say, you know, it's please take 5, tell 5, you know, sharing is caring. The more people we tell, the more people we share this stuff with, the less people will fall for them.
Sarah, thank you
very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And I know we are running short on time, so why don't we bring all the panelists back? We probably have about 5 minutes to open it up for questions. So let's open it up to council members. We heard some really great strategies. I think there were some really great themes that cut across on the importance of education, the importance of messaging. And I know many folks who are part of the council play roles in enforcement and in education. Let's see. Elizabeth, do we have any?
We have a question from Lois at the FTC.
Great. Lois.
Thank you, Chair Barkoff. It's wonderful to be here with my fellow colleagues on the EJCC. And needless to say, I and the FTC are huge fans of this type of research. I thank each of the panelists. You know, this kind of work segues perfectly with the new federal law, the Stop Senior Scams Act, which tasks the FTC to convene really an advisory group with a focus on retailers, educating consumers, training employees. And I want to focus on, each of you touched on signage, point of sale signage, and in particular, Dr. Lima, you talked about how poor it can be at point of sale and you know, can be perpendicular. And Director Gunther, I'm not sure you have really focused as much in your training on point of sale because the focus has been on trainers, retailers actually taking proactive steps. And Ms. Sinden, you also spoke about signage, point of sale materials. I'm wondering, has it really been quantified by anyone how effective that type of point of sale indication to stop, indication about how the gift cards are for gifts? Any actual research on that?
I know from our conversations with retailers, one of the things that they said is they had done some internal research. You know, of course, this is them showing that it wasn't effective, but they wanted to have that point of sale sign in there to be collaborative. Whether that's, that's really rigorous research or not. One of the things that we did here, and we focus on point of sale, but it's really the technology that comes up and prompting that employee to say those right questions. And then Marty kind of touched on this, and we talked to operational officers as well, that one of the issues they have just with these larger stores is getting that material to be consistent, not having those tears and those rips. And then some of the retailers that we talked to also talked about where to place those. Some of them have challenges placing them at the point of sale because that is an area where there are a lot of products. So I think there are challenges that we need to look at working together and how to overcome them, and how can we place those point of sale signs in an area that make the most impact, which is what's exciting about Marty's research.
I can probably come in there in terms of, with regards to the signage. It's very early days, to be fair, for us to tell yet at the moment whether or not the Take 5 Stop Fraud signage at supermarkets is going to have an impact. It's something that we've done sort of in the last year or so, working with the supermarkets. I mean, it's by design. The reason why Take 5 is yellow and black is not because for any reason that they're my favourite colours by any means. It's because they are sort of the warning colours and stand out. So one of the things that we really wanted to do with those supermarkets that we're working with is to really have stuff that stands out and to keep it very, very clear. I'm hoping that, we'll be able to tell in the next 6 months or so whether or not that's had an impact, but we'll know from our next batch of research, I guess.
Okay, great. I think we have time for maybe one more question if there are any more questions. Elizabeth, can you let me know if we have any others?
I don't see any in the chat, but it looks like Ben from SSA may have
Hi.
one.
Yes, thank you. I wasn't quick enough to raise my hand. Just one quick question for all of the panelists or any of the panelists. Are there any particular considerations for people who have cognitive decline, things that are being done out there, messages, or at least interventions that partners have put in place to support people with cognitive decline?
So I can pick up on this one. So one of the things that we're actually looking to do, because a lot of our efforts, to be fair, in the last couple of years have been concentrated around online, social media, sort of, those types of scams. One of the things that I want to concentrate on in the next year ahead is looking at how we can work with the digitally excluded. One of the things that we are actually doing is looking to work with more of the care homes in the UK. So there are a couple at the moment that are adopting Take 5 across their communications channels. But also it's actually for them in terms of training their staff and what to look out for. But generally more so, I mean, we do offer accessibility toolkits, etc. But I think in terms of there is more that we can do to be able to communicate with a far wider audience. Although I have to say, all of our messaging is actually tested and fully goes through a process to say, look, would this work for different types of groups? So would that work for the young, the middle-aged, elderly, or anyone with any learning disabilities or functionality problems? And so far, we're coming up trumps.
Any last thoughts, Marty or Jillian, that you want to add to this topic before we wrap it up? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to this panel. This really has been an incredible meeting, and I am sure that each of the council members and the public really learned a number of important things. I want to again say a special thank you to each of our panelists for providing such informative and impactful information about elder justice and the need for reforms, and for sharing your effective messaging techniques. I want to end by just kind of highlighting a few themes that really I heard throughout the panels. There is a lot to follow up on from the first panel. I think one thing we heard consistently throughout is really the fallout from the issues of understaffing in nursing homes, the impact it's having on people being able to access everything from basic care that they need, and that it's leading to the increased use and abuse of psychotropic medication. So I know that's something that it seemed like it cut across the board. Will, really interested in, a number of folks continuing to work with you, and as well committed to CMS, very engaged in working with a range of stakeholders as you're moving forward in this initiative, as well as highlighting how this initiative complements other efforts to transition people from nursing homes back to the community, including through Money Follows the Person. The information from Susan at the Department of Justice, I think, really aligned well, and again, talked about not only the enforcement efforts, but the important work to coordinate with federal, state, and local tribal partners, with CMS, and of course with us at the Administration for Community Living and the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. And again, that is one place where I think the Legal Service Corporation can easily plug in. And then finally, just want to say again how powerful the resident video was, really bringing home the impact that the lack of adequate standards comes from the second panel, really hearing very much some strategies for getting information out, not just consumer education, but involving retailers, financial institutions, how we need to think about targeted messaging. And I think across all three panelists, really some important strategies that we all can put in place in the work that we are doing to prevent scams. So it's evident to me that the EJCC and all of the stakeholders who joined today are deeply committed to the many facets of elder rights and elder justice. All of us are committed to the rights of older people to live free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. At ACL, our Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services and our Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program will continue to prioritize action in many of the areas that were highlighted for today's meeting. And while we have more work to do, and I know my fellow council members feel the same way, I hope that everyone feels energized by today's presentations and will recommit to our partnerships. Something we heard today and know from other research is that it's important to identify both universal messages and specific interventions when appropriate for specific communities. So we need to make sure our approaches are trauma-informed and culturally appropriate. And ACL and HHS across the board remain deeply committed to advancing equity and racial justice, promoting self-determination and reforms to guardianship, upholding the rights of residents in congregate and community-based long-term care settings, supporting older adults and people with disabilities to live in their communities, to enhance the response by adult protective services, to preserve economic security, and of course, to continue supporting and forming connections to legal assistance providers. We really appreciate the many ways our federal partners help our nation achieve these goals and the many, many partners outside of federal government. It has been a privilege to host today's meeting, and I want to thank you again to each and every one of our expert panelists and to each of my fellow EJCC members for your insightful questions. The work of EJCC is ever evolving as an all-of-government approach to elder justice. With our new member joining our existing members, I hope we all can renew our commitment to identify areas of collaboration and explore ways we can amplify each other's work to move us to a society in which Americans truly experience life free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. I want to give a huge thank you to the ACL staff, the Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services staff who made today possible. And I want to specifically call out Elizabeth Petrie, Isha Gurley, Eden Ruiz-Lopez, and many others who worked behind the scenes to make today's event possible. For more information about the EJCC, please visit our website at ejcc.acl.gov. And finally, I really want to thank each of today's attendees for joining us. We always appreciate the issues you bring to our attention for action. Thank you for your commitment. We are all partners in this critical endeavor of striving towards elder justice. Today's Elder Justice Coordinating Council meeting is now closed. Council members, we will convene again at the fall 2022 meeting to continue our work together to address elder abuse, neglect, exploitation, and other kinds of maltreatment of older adults. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.